Good afternoon. I extend a hearty welcome to all the delegates and the students to the 6th Reverend Dr. Gilburt Camillus Endowment Lecture. The program will begin at 2:40 p.m. I request all the participants to enter their name and designation with their institution address in the chat box. Good afternoon to all. I heartily welcome Reverend Dr. Gilbert Camillus, Secretary Arulanandar College, Karmatur, and the Honorable Resource Person, Dr. Joseph Turairaj, Professor of English, School of English and Foreign Languages, Gandhigram Rural Institute. We welcome you, delegates. We welcome you, Father. Shall we begin at 2:40, Father? Shall we begin now? Good afternoon, sir. Shall we start?
I am ready. If Father Gilbert is ready, I am ready.
Good afternoon, Father. Can we start? Good afternoon to all. The capacity to learn is a gift. The ability to learn is a skill. And the willingness to learn is a choice. Good afternoon to each one of you present here. On behalf of the faculty members of the Department of English, I heartily welcome respected Reverend Dr. Gilburt Camillus, Secretary, Arulanandar College, Kanmatur, respected Reverend Dr. Mariadas, the Principal of our college, respected Dr. Joseph Albert, the former Deputy Principal and the Head of the Department of our college, the Honorable Resource Person, Dr. A. Joseph Doreiraj, Professor of English, School of English and Foreign Languages, Gandhigram Rural Institute, beloved colleagues, staff members, participants from various other colleges, and my dear students. Once again, I welcome you all to the 6th Reverend Dr. Gilbert Camillus Endowment Lecture. Let's begin the day with a note of invocation through a prayer song. I now invite Dr. Rani Priyadarshini to welcome the dignitaries.
Literature is the way in which the soul of man expresses its joy through the written word and the forms which he chooses to give to his eternal being, says Tagore. A very good afternoon to the galaxy of intellectuals. It's indeed a high time to make up the lost time to be more active and productive. I deem it a great privilege to pronounce the welcome speech in this academic deliberation. First and foremost, I invoke the blessings of the Almighty to shower his choicest blessings upon us. The value of achievement lies in the achieving, says Albert Einstein. Yes, it's been 6 years since this endowment lecture got constituted on the name of Father Gilbert Camillus. Reverend Father Gilbert Camillus, Secretary of Arulananda College, Karumathur, Madurai, is an efficient academician and administrator. He served as principal of St. Xavier's College, Palayamkottai from the year 2013 to 2016. He also served as principal of St. Xavier's College, Jaipur, principal of Loyola College, Vetavalam, and controller of examinations, St. Joseph's College, Trichy. Recently, he got the Best Principal Award from AIACHE, New Delhi. His area of research are post-colonial studies and cultural studies. He has published several books and journal articles. He has also served as Director of Human Development Center in South America. He received faculty improvement training at the University of Oxford in the year 2007 and visited Fordham University, New York for postdoctoral preparation in the year 2011. I'm extremely overwhelmed to greet Reverend Father Gilbert Camillus to grace the occasion. Welcome, Father. A learned man has always wealth in himself is a Latin proverb. A devoted teacher, a humble man of excellence, a prudent administrator of eminence, and whatnot. It is none other than Dr. V.S. Joseph Albert. His ardent services to this college has definitely made a difference to the larger community for the greater good. I'm indeed honored to welcome Albert, sir, to this academic gathering. Welcome, sir. Literary events are always a nerd's delight. And of course, it's a celebration of knowledge. This is one such event that we are witnessing. It's time to extend a genial welcome to the stardom of the day, Dr. Joseph Durairaj. I'm literally awestruck on reading his profile. Excellence and eminence are the foremost principles of his agenda. At this juncture, I take pleasure in introducing the guest speaker. Professor Joseph Durairaj is a professor of English at the School of English and Foreign Languages at Gandhigram Rural Institute. During the academic year 2013 and 14, he was the Vice Chancellor in charge of Gandhigram University. He was a Fulbrighter in 2014 and visited educational institutions in Washington, D.C., New York, and Miami. He conducted a month-long teacher training program in Kandy, Sri Lanka in August 2007. He has also visited Gregorian University, Rome, Radboud University, the Netherlands, and Center Serves, Paris. Sir has authored 5 books, Myth and Literature, Interventions, Essays in Philosophy and Literary Theory, Philosophical Hermeneutics, FAQs on Research, Literature and Language, and Essays on Higher Education in India. He has also edited 2 books, Critical Essays on Indian English Poets and Essays on Gandhi. He has successfully guided 16 PhD candidates and has adjudicated more than 100 PhD theses. Dr. Joseph Durairaj is the founder editor of Gandhigram Literary Review. He is an assessor for NAC since 2010 and was involved in the preparation of NAC's revised methodology. He has assessed 35 colleges and universities all over the country, 15 as the chairperson of NAC peer teams. He has completed 2 major assignments for UPSC PT Board, New Delhi. Yes, folks, amidst us, the connoisseur of knowledge, the man of distinct vision, a fountainhead of illuminating ideas, an idol of knowledge and experience and inspiration to all of us. I humbly take this opportunity to welcome you to this endowment lecture. Welcome, sir. I also welcome the delegates, professors, and students from various colleges to this endowment lecture. My hearty welcome goes to the head of the Department of English and my fellow colleagues. Welcome, dear professors. And when you can't go back, you have to worry about the best way of moving forward, says Paulo Coelho. I take pleasure in welcoming the organizers of this endowment lecture as one of the plethora of events for the betterment of its stakeholders. I also owe a very big thanks to them for having made the stitch in right time to spread the aura of literature. Literature doesn't exist in a vacuum, says Ezra Pound. A warm welcome to all the vibrant literarians of the future to this Promethean world. Welcome, dear students. Once again, I take this opportunity to welcome one and all present here. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. This endowment to conduct annual lectures was constituted by professors from several departments of our college in honor of Reverend Dr. Gilbert Camillus to commemorate his valuable service to the college as a principal from 2013 to 2016. At this moment, we fondly remember all the achievements and milestones through which Father guides us during his tenure, and we acknowledge the valuable contributions of the respected professors towards the establishment. Our respected father, Reverend Dr. Gilbert Camillus, is eminent for elevating the minds of the students, igniting our spirit, and instill in us a love for learning. I, with much delight, invite Father to address the felicitation.
Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Are you
Father,
able
we
to?
Yes,
can
sir.
hear you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, Father.
Reverend Father Principal, Dr. Mariadas, respected Professor Dr. Joseph Durairaj, the resource person, Mr. Mr. Edward, the head of the Department of English, Dr. Albert Joseph, the members of the faculty from various colleges, the students and the scholars from different colleges and universities, and dear my professors from St. Xavier's, good afternoon. I'm really delighted to be with you as the part of your endowment lecture. I would like to thank the members of the faculty, the officials, the professors, and Mr. Edward, the HOD, and all the others who have organized this wonderful lecture. It is a pleasure to see Professor Joe Durai, who is my friend, an eminent scholar. I'm sure his lecture will help you to go deeper into the concept of evolution of literary criticism. I think Professor Joe's area of specialization is hermeneutics. The department has chosen the right person to deliver the lecture on critiquing the canon. I'm sure it's going to be an interesting session. The concept of freedom differs from one person to the other. We move from being to becoming. Nothing is fixed or permanent in life. The writers have their own views and ideas in creating their work of art. This may develop opposite views, but at the same time, the conflicting ideas may produce the fertile union of opposites. Each person is unique and responsible for his or her own actions. We know that rules and regulations were given by the literary critics. These rules, doctrines, and dogmas cannot be questioned. At the same time, we see an evolution from Aristotle to Gayatri Spivak on literary criticism. Thoughts may vary from person to person. Today, people question about existentialism. They do not accept any critical theory. They say, reader is the critic, reader becomes the critic in himself or herself. So let us listen to Professor Joe Durai and find out whether hermeneutics can be used as a dogma in critiquing the canon. I wish you all the best. Thanks for inviting me to this endowment lecture, and have a fruitful deliberation. God bless you.
Thank you, Father. I feel extremely privileged to introduce a respectable resource person. He is a committed academician. He has been our academic friend and a steady source of guidance. He has been there as a team member, and he has visited several institutions all over India. He had visited our college for the academic audit. For the past 5 years, Professor Joseph has been a rememberable editorial member in the editorial board for the publication of books. He is an epitome of wide knowledge, be it the academic field, higher education, or theories on academic paradigms of education. I'm happy to invite our resource person to share his ideas on critiquing the canon.
Thank you, Professor Ajita. Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. It's audible.
Good afternoon, dear friends. At the outset, I would like to thank St. Xavier's College, Palimkote, in particular the Department of English, St. Xavier's College, Palimkote, for inviting me to deliver the 6th Reverend Dr. Gilbert Camillus Endowment Lecture. I am deeply honored, and I thank the management, in particular the Department of English, for this warm invitation. Reverend Dr. Mariadas, Principal, St. Xavier's College, Palimkote; Reverend Dr. Gilbert Camillus, Secretary, Arulanandar College, Karmathur; Professor Twin Anthony Edward, Head of the Department of English at St. Xavier's College, Palimkote; Dr. S. Varalakshmi, Coordinator of this Endowment Lecture Program; Dr. B.S. Joseph Albert, the former Deputy Principal and the former Head of the Department, the man who built up the department; Dr. Lizzie William; faculty members, and dear student friends. Good afternoon to all of you once again. I am doubly privileged to deliver this endowment lecture. I'll clarify why I say doubly privileged. As Father Gilbert mentioned, Reverend Dr. V. Gilbert and I, we are friends for more than 40 years. In fact, we are classmates, and I cherish my association and my friendship with Father Gilbert Camillus, presently the Secretary at Arulanandar College, Karmathur. So therefore, when Professor Joseph Albert and Dr. Lizzie William invited me to deliver Dr. Gilbert Camillus Endowment Lecture, I immediately said yes, because this is one way I can pay tribute to my friend for more than 40 years. I said I am doubly privileged. So what is the other dimension? The other dimension is coming to St. Xavier's Palimkote is like homecoming to me, because many may not know this. I taught at St. Xavier's College, Palimkote for less than 3 months before moving over to Gandhigram Rural Institute, where I am now currently. So therefore, anytime I come to St. Xavier's Palimkote, it is homecoming to me, and I cherish my bond and association with St. Xavier's Palimkote. So therefore, once again, I thank the organizers for this invitation. So dear friends, today's topic is critiquing the canon. And now the time is 3:05. I shall speak for exactly 1 hour. I shall stop at 4:05, and maybe another 15 to 20 minutes we will have questions and answers. So the topic for today's lecture is critiquing the canon, and my talk or presentation is divided into 4 parts. In the first part of the presentation, I would like to answer 2 important questions. What is canon and what constitutes the canon? I shall also speak very briefly on canon formation. So this will be the first part of the presentation. Now, in the second part of the presentation, I would like to raise a very important question. What is wrong with the literary canon as it exists today? Because the topic for today's endowment lecture is critiquing the canon or reformulating the canon or rewriting the canon. So why should we critique the canon? What is wrong with the canon? So this will be addressed in the second part of my discussion, the second part of my presentation. And in the third part of the presentation, I would like to talk about the ways and means in which we can critique the canon, in which we can deconstruct the canon, and also in which we can rewrite and reformulate the canon. And in the fourth part of the presentation, I would like to very specifically address teachers. What should we do to critique the canon with a view to including new text? So dear friends, this is how I have organized my lecture. Now to go to the first part of the lecture, I will draw your attention to newspaper clippings. I repeat, I'll be drawing your attention to some newspaper clippings. In particular, I'll be referring to Times of India, and I will draw your attention to 4 news items or 4 events. Now, this is from Times of India. Just as we have the Hindu and the Indian Express in North India, Times of India is famous. Of course, we do have Times of India in the South also. So this is a news item, a clipping that appeared in Times of India on the 26th of August last year. So 26th August 2021, Times of India. So the news clipping, it bore the title, Delhi University drops stories of Dalit writers from English syllabus. I will read out 2 short paragraphs. This is from the Times of India, 26th August. Removed from the English syllabus in Delhi University. Despite the resistance of 15 elected members, the Academic Council, which met on Tuesday, approved the job. This is the first paragraph. Now the second paragraph reads like this. In a paper titled Women's Writing in Semester 5, the Oversight Committee has committed the maximum vandalism. It first decided to remove 2 Dalit authors, namely Bama and Sugita Rani. Second, the committee, as an afterthought, suddenly asked for the deletion of the celebrated short story of Mahashweta Devi Draupadi. So dear friends, I'm sure many of you might have read this news item that appeared in the Times of India on the 26th of August 2021. And I am sure many of you, both students and staff members, I am sure you would have been disturbed, you would have got agitated reading this news item. Now, there are other stories as well. This is not the only story. This is not the lone story. There are other stories as well. And let me talk about those stories as well. Now, this particular news clipping, it appeared in the year 2010 on the 27th of October, once again, the Times of India. So the Times of India, 27th of October 2010. And this news item is about Rohinton mystery and his novel, Such a Long Journey. Now here is a one sentence taken from, here is the single sentence taken from the Times of India. It reads like this. Rohinton mystery's novel, Such a Long Journey, has been pulled from a course syllabus and burned by students at Mumbai University. So this happened 12 years ago, 2010. Now here is one more news clipping, once again from the Times of India. And I am sure all of you will remember this particular example because this created a nationwide controversy. And this was in the year 2011. And the date is 10th of October. Delhi University to scrap Ramanujan essay on Ramayana. The 30-page essay, which offers a number of tellings of the epic story of Lord Rama, including the Jain, Buddhist, and Kannada narratives, had not gone down well with sections of the students, some of whom called it blasphemous. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this story, and this happened 2011, October 10th, 2011. Now, you are at Palimkote. You are at St. Xavier's Palimkote, and you are affiliated to MS University Tirunelveli. So what happened in MS University Tirunelveli 2 years ago? So this is a one sentence extract from Times of India dated 12th November 2020. So the sentence reads like this: Tamil Nadu's MS University withdraws Arundhati Roy's book Walking with the Comrades from syllabus after a section of students complained. So dear friends, I have given you some examples, all real examples and all taken from the Times of India. What is common is some books and some authors were rejected. I repeat, some books and some authors were rejected. The reason is they were considered or they were branded non-canonical. So which means, dear friends, so first we have to clarify the meaning of the term canon and then discuss what is wrong with the canon and discuss further as to how we can rectify and reformulate the canon. So the first part of the discussion addresses the question, what is canon? How do we define the canon? How do we understand the term canon? Now, as students of English language and literature, we are very often interested in analyzing the etymology of words. So if you look into the origin of the word canon, or if you analyze the etymology of the word canon, you realize that the root word is a Greek word. So the word canon, the English word canon, has come from the Greek canon, K-A-N-O-N, which means a measuring rod or standard. Now here is a short quote taken from the Jerome Biblical Commentary, and there is an entire chapter on canon. So let me read out a short paragraph from the Jerome Biblical Commentary, the chapter on canonicity. Now the quote goes like this: the original meaning of the term canon was reed, R-E-E-D, reed. The word gradually came to signify any straight rod or bar, a measuring stick or rod used by masons and carpenters. Eventually, the term assumed a metaphorical connotation and began to mean a norm or standard, something serving to determine, rule, or measure other entities. So, dear friends, if you look at the origin of the term canon, if you look at the etymology of the term canon, we realize that it has come from Greek and it literally means a measuring rod or a standard. Now, what is this measuring rod? What do you measure and how do you measure? How do you go about? Now, here is the line. Okay, with a pencil or with a piece of chalk, I draw a line. Now, is it a straight line or is it slanting or is it curved? How do I know that it is a straight line and not a slanting line? So in order to determine whether this particular line is a straight one or a slanting one, I use the canon, that is the measuring rod or standard. So this is the original meaning of the term canon. Now, dear friends, next we come to an important question. I know I'm giving this lecture in a Catholic institution. Okay, so where both staff and students are very familiar with the Bible. Now, I also realize that this lecture happens at St. Xavier's College, Palimkote, where there is a Catholic institution, St. Xavier's College, and there is also a Protestant institution, St. John's College. So some of you may be wondering, why do I bring in these two institutions? Why do I talk about St. John's College and why do I bring in St. Xavier's College? Now there is a reason. Now, when we talk about the canon, we have to raise an important question. How many books are there in the Holy Bible? Now, if I ask you, all of you will give me the correct answer. So as we all know, the Bible is divided into two parts. We have the Old Testament and we have the New Testament. The Old Testament books written before the birth of Jesus Christ and the New Testament books written after the birth of Jesus Christ. Now, if I ask a student at St. Xavier's College, Palinkote, how many books are there in the New Testament, he or she will answer me, oh, it is an easy question. There are 27 books in the New Testament. Now, if I walk to St. John's College, situated very close to St. Xavier's College, and if I ask a student or a staff member, okay, let us take the New Testament, how many books are there in the New Testament? He or she will give me the answer 27. So which means, as far as the New Testament is concerned, whether we go by the Catholic version or by the Protestant version, the answer is there are 27 books in the New Testament. We start with the 4 Gospels, then we have the Acts of the Apostles, then we have the letters or the epistles, and finally we end with the book of Revelation or Apocalypse. So there is absolutely no difference whether it is the Catholic version or the Protestant version. But here is the second question. Once again, if I approach a student or a staff member at St. Xavier's College, Palinkote, and ask him or ask her, okay, let us talk about the Old Testament. How many books are there in the Old Testament? The answer that I would get at St. Xavier's College, Palinkote will be 46. Whereas if I move over to Sarah Tucker or St. John's, the answer that I would get is 39. So which means, as far as the New Testament is concerned, there is no controversy in the number of books. The Protestant version says there are 27 books. The Catholic version also says there are 27 books. But then when we talk about the Old Testament, the Catholic version says there are 46 books, whereas the Protestant version says, no, it is not 46, it is only 39. So which means there is a gap. We have to answer this gap. We have to address this gap. So 7 books are missing from the Protestant edition or the Protestant version. Now, 2 questions. What are these missing books? And a very important question, why have these books not been included in the Protestant version? So the answer to the first question, what are these missing books? Okay, we have the book of Tobit, Judith, Baruch, Sirach. In some versions, it is also called Ecclesiastes, then 1 Maccabees, 2 Maccabees, and Wisdom. So these 7 books, we do not find them in the Protestant version because, I'll go to the second question, why? Because they are considered apocryphal. I repeat, they are considered apocryphal. Now, if you look into the dictionary for the etymology or the root word for apocryphal, you realize that apocryphal, originally Greek, it means hidden text, and the implication or the connotation is false or spurious. In simple and plain language, these 7 books are considered non-canonical. I repeat, these 7 books, Tobit, Judith, Baruch, Sirach, 1 Maccabees, 2 Maccabees, and Wisdom, these 7 books are considered non-canonical by the Protestants and by a few other Orthodox traditions, whereas the Catholics would consider them canonical and very much a part of the Bible. So for the Catholics, these books are called deuterocanonical. Deutero means second or secondary. Now, dear friends, some of you may be wondering, why do I talk about the Bible? Because I have been asked today to talk about the canon, but then why do I talk about the Bible? Now, I am not a Bible scholar, nor am I a theologian, but then I did talk about the Bible for a very simple reason. If you look at the origin of the word canon, it starts with Bible studies. I repeat, when you think about or when you discuss the origin of the word canon, you realize that it all started with biblical study. So therefore, in biblical studies, in the context of biblical studies, canon would mean a list of authoritative books. I repeat, because in the first part of the presentation, my task is to clarify the meaning of the term canon. So as far as biblical studies are concerned, the term canon means or implies or signifies authoritative books. Authoritative books. Now, what is the meaning of authoritative? It has two meanings, it has two significations. They have been considered or they have been classified authoritative by the authority vested with Vatican and Rome. Okay, so these books, okay, books in the Old Testament and books in the New Testament, so they have been authorized as original. They have been considered original. They have been considered canonical by Rome, by Vatican. So therefore, it is authoritative. Now, it is also authoritative in a slightly different sense because these are holy books, these are divine books, these are sacred books, these are books divinely inspired. They have the inherent authority. So therefore, we consider these books authoritative on the basis of the two meanings. Fine. Now, dear friends, that is the first part of my discussion. So I have clarified the meaning of the term canon. Fine. Now, what I did was only half. I did clarify the meaning of the term canon, but only with reference to the Bible. So therefore, now my task is I need to talk about the meaning of the word canon in the context of literature and in the context of literary studies. Now, in the literary domain, in the context of literary studies, the word canon has two meanings. I repeat, in the literary context, the word canon or the term canon has two meanings. So what are the two meanings? So the first meaning is it is an authoritative and definitive list of works of an author, usually a dead author. Okay, now for the sake of the students, I will give an example. Now we know Shakespeare has written dramas and he has also written some long poems and he has also written some sonnets. Now imagine today or tomorrow or the day after or the following week, okay, Oxford University or Cambridge University comes up with an announcement or a declaration. We are very happy to announce that a brand new Shakespearean sonnet has been discovered. Okay, so imagine there is an announcement like this. A new sonnet of Shakespeare has been unearthed. A new sonnet of Shakespeare has been discovered. Now, immediately some critics will ask, how do you know for sure that this was written by Shakespeare? How do you prove the authenticity of this sonnet? Okay, how certain are you that this is a sonnet that was actually written by Shakespeare himself? So how do you know? Of course, we have ways and means. We cannot argue with 100% certainty. Okay, to maybe 60% or 65% or 70%, we can say, okay, this was written by Shakespeare. Now you look at the language, you look at the composition, you look at the stanza structure, you look at the lexemes, you look at the morphemes. Okay, so they will give you a very clear indication as to whether it was written by Shakespeare or whether it was written by somebody else. So therefore, the first meaning of the word canon in the context of literary studies is it is an authoritative and definitive list of the works of an author, usually a dead author. Now, why a dead author? Because the dead author, particularly an author like Thiruvallur or an author like Camber or an author like Shakespeare or an author like Chaucer, they have not left behind any manuscript. Okay, whereas in the case of Vairamuthu or Jayakantan or Sandilyan, their manuscripts are available. So therefore, it is easy for us to check. Whereas in the case of Chaucer, in the case of Spencer, in the case of Shakespeare, the manuscripts are not available. So therefore, we are not very sure whether this was written by Chaucer himself or by somebody else, whether this particular sonnet is Shakespearean or by some other author. So therefore, dear friends, in the context of literary studies, the first meaning of the term canon is it is an authoritative and definitive list of works of an author, usually a dead author. Now, we are not so much worried about the first meaning of the term canon. We are concerned about the second meaning of the term canon. And what is the second meaning? The second meaning is, to put it in a very simple language, canon in the context of literary studies is a list of great authors and great books. Now we talk of the Tamil canon. In the Tamil canon, who are the big names? Who are the great poets? Who are the great dramatists? Who are the great playwrights? Or if you talk of the English canon, as far as English literature is concerned, as far as the English canon is concerned, who are the great authors and which are the great books? Which are the great poems? Which are the great short stories? Which are the great novels? So therefore, Matthew Arnold in 1869, he brought out a very important book bearing the title Culture and Anarchy. So in that particular book, which was published in 1869, Matthew Arnold wrote about the canon. Of course, he did not use the word canon, but then he said, the best which has been taught and said in the world. So what is a great work of art? What is a great novel? What is a great poem? What is a great drama? What is a great short story? The best that has been taught and said and articulated and written in the world. So in other words, in the context of literary studies, canon would mean the best authors and the best books, the great authors and the great books. Okay, so dear friends, here is the definition of canon. I have taken it from the Norton Anthology. Just one sentence, and the definition goes like this. So according to the Norton Anthology, the canon is the range of works that a consensus of scholars, teachers, and readers of a particular time and culture consider great or major. Look at the last two words. I would like to draw your attention to the last two words of the definition. So great author or great book, or a major author or a major book. So therefore, as far as the English canon is concerned, as far as English literature is concerned, who will be the major authors? Okay, so the major authors would be, let us say, Chaucer. Yes, certainly. Shakespeare. Yes, of course. Then we have Milton. Then we have Matthew Arnold. Then, of course, we have T.S. Eliot, who is both British and American. Then crossing over the Atlantic, if you go to the American soil, we have Whitman, Walt Whitman. Then you have Frost, Robert Frost. Then you have the famous novelist and short story writer, Scott Fitzgerald, and their works. Okay, so these are some of the big names as far as the English canon is concerned. If we talk of the Tamil canon, then certainly we have to talk of Jayakantan, we have to talk of Vairamuthu. That is the present day authors. Fine. So now let us go back to the English canon. So Chaucer will be there, Shakespeare will be there, Milton will be there, Matthew Arnold will be there, T.S. Eliot will be there. So these are some of the big names, really big names. Now in this context, I would like to draw your attention to an important book that was published in 1994. The author of the book is an American who at that time taught at Yale University and was a close friend and disciple of Jacques Derrida. His name is Harold Bloom. So Harold Bloom in 1994 brought out a book bearing the title Western Canon. I repeat, in 1994, the American author Harold Bloom brought out a book bearing the title Western Canon. In this book, he talks about 26 great authors. Okay, so who are the 26 authors? Great authors. I'm not going to give you the entire list, but I will give you some important names. So we have Shakespeare, then we have the Italian Dante, then we have Chaucer, then we have the French Molière, the Englishman's Milton, Johnson, the American Whitman, then the nature poet Wordsworth, then the Russian Tolstoy, then you have the Norwegian Ibsen, the Latin American Bogue and Neruda, then the Irish Beckett, the list goes on. And he has included 4 women authors. Who are the 4 women authors who figure in Bloom's The Western Canon? We have Jane Austen, we have George Eliot, we have Virginia Woolf, and we have Emily Dickinson. So in this book, The Western Canon, Harold Bloom talks about 26 great authors. among these 26 great authors or 26 major authors, we have 22 male authors and we have only 4 women authors. We don't have any Asian. Of course, the title is the Western Canon, so that is the reason why he has not included any Asian or American or Australian. Anyway, fine. Now, here is an important question. So people did ask Harold Bloom, okay, you have chosen 26 authors starting with Chaucer and Shakespeare and others. Now, on what basis or using what criteria did you arrive at this list, the list of 26 great authors? So you said you have chosen Chaucer, you have chosen Ibsen, you have chosen Dante, you have chosen Molière, you have chosen Jane Austen. On what basis? So what were the criteria, the evaluation criteria that you used to finalize this list, the list consisting of 26 big names? Now Bloom answered, on the basis of 4 criteria did I choose these 26 authors. So what are the 4 criteria? Criterion 1, immortality or timelessness. Now we say Shakespeare is timeless. Even though he wrote his dramas and poems in the 16th century Elizabethan England, we still read them. Even in 2022, his dramas are prescribed, his poems are read, his dramas are analyzed, his poems are critiqued. So immortality or timelessness. So this is the first criterion. The second criterion, according to Bloom, is universality. Even though Shakespeare wrote for an Elizabethan English audience, his dramas, his poems, his sonnets are read all over the world, people belonging to all religions, all cultures, all castes. So therefore, universality, that is the second dimension or the second criterion. The third criterion, according to Bloom, is originality, and the fourth criterion is aesthetic beauty. So dear friends, Bloom in the Western canon, he gives us a list of 26 authors, 22 male authors and 4 women authors. And he tells us that he chose these 26 names on the basis of 4 criteria, namely immortality, universality, originality, and aesthetic beauty. Okay, so dear friends, this is the first part of my presentation. So in the first part of the presentation, I have answered a very important question. What is canon? How do we define the canon? What do we mean by the canon? And I have given you 2 answers. Of course, they do converge. So the 2 perspectives are, I started with the biblical perspective. Then I moved over to the literary perspective. So in the first part of the lecture, I raised a question, what is the canon? And the answer is, a canon is a list of authoritative books. A canon is a list of major authors and major books. A canon is a list of great authors and great books. Fine. So that was the first part of the presentation. Now, the second part of the presentation, I'll be raising an important question. The question is, what is wrong with the canon? Something is wrong with the canon. That is why the title of my lecture for today's presentation is critiquing the canon or deconstructing the canon. Had the canon been all right, we would have nothing to crib about the canon, nothing to complain about the canon. But something is wrong with the canon. That is why we talk about critiquing the canon or deconstructing the canon. So the question is, what is wrong with the canon? Okay, fine. Now let us go back. How did I start my presentation? I started my presentation with 4 newspaper clippings, and all the 4 clippings were taken from the Times of India. The first newspaper clipping said, Delhi University removed 3 authors, Bama, Sugitharani, and Mahashweta Devi. Then Bombay University removed Rohinton Mysteries novel. Then the third clipping talked about Delhi University removing the celebrated essay by Ramanujan. And the fourth clipping told us about how MS University, Tirunelveli, very close to St. Xavier's College, Palinkote, they removed a book by Arundhati Roy. Now the question is, who decides that something is canonical and something is non-canonical? So that is the first question. The second question is, on what basis is it decided that this is a great book and this is not a great book? Who decides this is so-and-so is a major author? Oh, this person is not a major author. So these are some important questions, and we will be trying to search for answers to these important questions. So what are the questions? Who decides that so-and-so is a great author? Or who decides so-and-so is not a great author, not a canonical author, not a major author? Now, when you search for answers to these questions, we realize that there is politics. I repeat, when we talk about who is a great author, who is an average author, who is an unknown author, a non-canonical author, we realize that we are entering the world of politics. So there is a lot of politics when it comes to deciding who is a canonical author and who is not inside the canon and kept outside the periphery of the canon. So therefore, dear friends, we realize that there is a strong nexus, or there is an unholy alliance between, I will talk about 4 factors. Number 1, race and canon. I will explain this. So the first one is, we realize that there is a hand-in-glove association or an unholy alliance or a strong nexus between, number 1, race and canon. Number 2, gender and canon. Number 3, economic status and canon. And number 4, the last one, sexual orientation and canon. In other words, we realize that the canon is androcentric, the canon is Eurocentric, the canon is bourgeois, and the canon is homophobic. Okay, so I have used 4 terms while talking about the canon. So the canon is androcentric, the canon is Eurocentric, the canon is not only androcentric and Eurocentric, it is bourgeois, and finally we come to the conclusion that the canon is also homophobic. Now, what is the meaning of androcentric? Now, if you were to draw a list of, let us say, 100 great authors of the world, or 100 great poets of the world, or 50 great novelists in Hindi, or 50 great short story writers in Tamil, what do we realize? We realize that most of the names, they are male names. So in other words, we realize that all over the world, whether it is French or German or Italian or Dutch or English or Tamil, we realize that all great writers happen to be men. And this is not an accident. Believe me, this is not an accident. There is a lot of politics in it. So therefore, the first realization is all great authors happen to be male. So the canon is androcentric. Now the canon is not only androcentric, the canon is Eurocentric. Okay, so look at the great authors. They are all men and they are all white men. They are British or American or European. You don't have a dark-skinned poet. You don't have a brown-skinned short story writer. You don't have a yellow-skinned playwright. So all great writers, they are men and they are white men. And not only that, the canon is androcentric and Eurocentric. The canon is also bourgeois. If you are a poor writer, if you are a Dalit poet, if you are a tribal short story writer, if you are an Adivasi poet, what happens? Even if you write well, the chances of getting your poems published or your short stories published or your novel translated into other languages, the chances are very remote and very dim. I'll give you an example. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Malayalam novel called Kochireti. So Kochireti is supposed to be one of the first novels by a tribal writer from Kerala. The author of this novel is Narayan. Actually, he worked in the post office in one of the remote places in Kerala. He's a tribal writer. So he completed the novel Kochireti in 1988. But then no publisher came forward. In fact, even one publisher lost the manuscript and with great difficulty it was retrieved. So it took 10 long years for Narayan to get his novel Kochereti published. But anyway, the story is different after the novel was published. It won many awards, including an award for translation. But the point that I want to emphasize is this: had Narayan, if Narayan had been rich, had he belonged to the mainstream, if he had come from the upper class or the upper caste, the possibilities are that his work would have been published maybe in 1 year's time or 2 years' time or 3 years' time, and it would have certainly not taken 10 long years for the novel to get published. So therefore, dear friends, number one, the canon is androcentric. All great writers happen to be male. Number two, the canon is Eurocentric. All great writers happen to be white-skinned. And all great writers, they are from a respectable family or caste or religious background. So they belong to the bourgeois class or the bourgeois category. And the last one is interesting and shocking. The canon is also homophobic. In other words, there is a direct connection between your sexual orientation and the fact whether your book will be accepted or rejected. If you are a heterosexual, then what happens? Heteronormativity, then the chances of your poem being published or your novel being translated into other languages or your drama being staged, the chances are bright or brighter. Whereas if you're a gay, if you're a lesbian, if you're a queer, then what happens? Because of your sexual orientation, the chances of your poem being published or your short stories getting translated into other languages, the chances are little dim. And I will give you two examples. You take two American poets, Adrienne Rich and Audre Lorde. Both of them are poets and both of them are feminists. While Adrienne Rich is a white poet, Audre Lorde was a black poet. What happened? The point is, whether it is Adrienne Rich or Audre Lorde, both their poems were published. But then they faced a lot of problems. They faced a lot of persecutions. Why? Because they both were lesbians. In fact, Audre Lorde describes herself as black, lesbian, mother, warrior poet. So therefore, dear friends, I would like to conclude the second part of my discussion. So the second part of the discussion, I raised an important question. The question is, what is wrong with the canon? So what is wrong with the canon? The canon is not without any controversy. There are a lot of controversies as far as the canon is concerned, whether it is the English canon or the French canon or the German canon or even the Tamil canon. Why? Because if you take the English canon, we realize that the canon is androcentric, the canon is Eurocentric, the canon is bourgeois, and the canon is homophobic. So that is why jokingly it is mentioned that the canon, the English canon, is dominated by dead white guys. Okay, so please remember these three terms. If you look at the English canon, whether we are talking of the British canon or the American canon, we realize that the canon is dominated by dead white guys. White guys, Eurocentric guys, male-centered. Okay, in other words, the canon is white, male, Anglo-European, and most of them are heterosexuals. Fine. So dear friends, in the first part of the discussion, I raised an important question. The question is, what is the canon and how do we define the canon? And I defined the canon as a list of authoritative books, a list of great authors and great books, a list of major authors and major books. But the important question is, on what basis or on what criteria did were these writers selected as great writers? These writers were recognized as major writers. Then we realize that the criteria are not very clean. There is a lot of politics. There is an unholy alliance between race and canon, between sex and gender, between one's economic status and the canon. and also one's sexual orientation and the canon. So therefore, we realize that the canon is not okay. The formation of the canon is not okay. There are a lot of controversies, and the evaluation norms or the evaluation criteria, they are not acceptable totally. So therefore, I come to the third part of my presentation. Now that we have established very clearly and also conclusively that the canon is not okay, the canon is riddled by controversies, the canon is, the selection of names is marked by politics, then what should we do next? So the next stage is, the next step is, we need to critique the canon. We need to deconstruct the canon. We need to rewrite the canon. Okay, fine. Now, the students, whether you are an MA student or a BA student, I am sure you must have had some exposure to post-colonialism, some exposure to feminism, some exposure to cultural studies. Now, one of the agenda of feminism or feminist studies, and one of the agenda of cultural studies, and one of the agenda of post-colonial studies is, okay, all three, whether it is gender studies or feminism or post-colonial studies or cultural studies, all three, they have something common, that is critiquing the canon and rewriting the canon. In the context of post-colonial studies, raise an important question. Why should we talk about only white writers? Why should we talk about only European writers? Why should we talk about only British and American writers? Why not talk about, why not discuss African writers? Why not discuss New Zealand writers, the native writers, the Maori writers? Why not discuss writers from Sri Lanka? So in other words, from a post-colonial point of view, we want to expand the list and include not just white authors, but also black authors, brown-skinned authors, yellow-skinned authors. So we want it to be multicultural. So this is one of the agenda of post-colonial studies. Now, when we talk about gender studies or feminism, women realize that the canon, all the great writers happen to be men, happen to be male, and they do realize that this is not an accident. This is the cunningness of man. This is the politics of man. So therefore, they want to destroy the canon. They want to critique the canon and bring in women authors. Okay. So there are a lot of women authors, but they have not been recognized. They have not been given representation. And some of them have been buried. So we need to resurrect them. So therefore, one of the agenda of feminism or feminist studies is to destroy the canon as it exists today and to rewrite the canon. And in the process of rewriting the canon, what you do is you include a lot of women authors, you include a lot of women writers. So therefore, dear friends, the third part of the presentation, it talks about how do we go about when we talk about critiquing the canon or deconstructing the canon. So in other words, okay, here is a list of great authors. Here is a list of great poets. Here is a list of great short story writers. Here is a list of great playwrights. Here is a list of great critics. Then when you go through the list, when you look at the list very carefully, you realize that this is not clean. There are problems, there are issues, there are controversies. They are all male, they are all Europeans, they are all white-skinned, they are all bourgeois, they are all heterosexual. So therefore, you want to rewrite the canon. You want to reformulate the canon. Okay, fine. Yes, all of us agree that the canon has to be rewritten. The canon has to be reformulated. The boundaries of the canon have to be redrawn. All of us agree on this. There is no second opinion. There is no third opinion. But the question is, how do we do this? How do we go about? What is the strategy? What is the pedagogy? What is the methodology? Now, there are two answers. The question is, how do we reformulate the canon? How do we critique the canon in the first place? And in the second place, after critiquing the canon, how do we redress or how do we address the gaps and how do we reformulate the canon? So we have two solutions. We have two strategies. We have two methodologies. Now, the first strategy or the first methodology is, okay, you remove a few names, and in those empty slots or in those vacant slots, you fill in names from the forgotten races, the forgotten gender, the forgotten cultures, and the forgotten languages. I'll give some examples. We have drawn up a list of 100 great poets. Okay, let us imagine slot number 26 is Spencer. So what do? You remove Spencer. Okay, Spencer is an important man, so therefore we will not remove Spencer. Okay, so imagine there is a minor poet. Okay, so what do? You remove that particular poet. So slot number 64 is vacant. Similarly, slot number 78 is vacant. Slot number 92 is vacant. Slot number 99 is vacant, because we have removed those names. We have deleted those names. So what do? We have 4 vacant positions. We have 4 vacant slots. In the first vacant slot, you include an African poet. In the second vacant slot, you include an Indian poet. In the third vacant slot, you include a Canadian Aboriginal writer. In the fourth vacant slot, you include someone from South Asia. Okay, so which means earlier all the 100 names were white names. So what did we do? We pulled out 4 names, we removed 4 names, and we substituted those 4 names with names of our choice. 1 African, 1 Indian, 1 South Asian, and 1 native Canadian. So this is one way of rewriting the canon. Okay, so an easy solution and easy option is to delete a few names, to remove a few names, and fill the vacant slots with names from the forgotten castes or the forgotten races or the forgotten gender or the forgotten languages or the forgotten cultures. Now, is this a happy solution? Is this an efficient solution? Is this an acceptable solution? Now, the answer is unfortunately no. Why? Because this is arbitrary. This is not based on any scientific criteria. This is not based on any acceptable criteria. So therefore, let us not pursue this line, removing a few names, deleting a few names, and substituting those names with other names of our choice. This is not a viable solution. This is not an acceptable solution or a strategy. Okay, so what then is the acceptable solution? And is there any critic, or are there critics who have suggested other viable solutions when it comes to redressing and reformulating and rewriting the canon? Fine. Now, as students of post-colonial studies, we are all familiar with 3 Australian critics, Bill Ashcroft, Griffiths, and Tiffin. So 3 names, Ashcroft, Griffiths, and Tiffin, all whites, all Australian post-colonial critics. In fact, some 40 years ago, they came up with a bestseller called The Empire Writes Back, which not only inaugurated but also pioneered post-colonial studies in the Indian context. Okay, even much before that, Edward Said's Orientalism, it inaugurated post-colonial studies in Western universities. But as far as Indian higher educational institutions are concerned, it is only after the publication of The Empire Writes Back, that happened in the 1980s, that a new branch of studies called post-colonial studies entered English departments. Anyway, that is another story. We will talk about it another time. Okay, so Ashcroft and Griffiths and Tiffin, okay, they came up with a brilliant book, a bestseller, The Empire Writes Back. They followed it up with another book, Post-Colonial Studies, a Reader. Now, in that book, they make it very clear 2 things. Number 1, yes, the canon has to be rewritten. Yes, the canon needs to be reformulated. But the strategy is, the methodology is, instead of removing a few names and substituting them with names of your choice, what you do is you question the evaluation criteria. Okay, so you have 2 authors. You have Shakespeare on the one hand and you have Bama on the other. You have Milton on the one hand and you have Sugita Rani on the other. You have T.S. Eliot on the one hand and the author of Draupadi, Mahashweta Devi on the other. I'm referring to the news clipping from the Times of India, how last year Delhi University removed Bama, Sujita Rani, and the celebrated short story by Mahashweta Devi called Draupadi, which runs to 15 to 20 pages. Okay, fine. So now the question is, on what basis did you include Shakespeare? And in the same breath, you raise a question, on what basis did you push Bama out of the curriculum? On what basis did you include T.S. Eliot? Once again, on what basis or using what evaluation criteria did you marginalize, did you exclude Mahashweta Devi's Draupadi? So therefore, what Ashcroft, Griffiths, and Tiffin would suggest in their book Postcolonial Studies, the reader is, instead of deleting a few names and substituting those Bacon's laws with names of your choice, what you do is you work at a higher level, you operate at a higher level. And what is this higher level? You question, you critique the evaluation criteria. On what basis is Shakespeare in? And on what basis is Bama out? So who decides on what basis? Is it decided on a literary basis, or is it decided on a religious basis, on a political basis, is an ideological basis? So therefore, dear friends, instead of a simplistic solution, we will work at a higher level and think of a viable solution. So that solution is, when we talk of critiquing the canon or deconstructing the canon, we shall look at the evaluation criteria, because the assumption is once the evaluation criteria are set right, then the result gets automatically corrected. So in other words, we have two challenges, we have two tasks. So what are the two challenges? What are the two tasks? So the first challenge is we have to deconstruct the canon, and the second challenge is we have to challenge the idea of canonical literature as such. In other words, we have to challenge the idea of canonical literature. We have to challenge the idea of great literature. How do we challenge? How do we critique? Okay, the answer is very simple: by including more women writers, by including more indigenous writers, by including into the fold Dalit writers, Adivasi writers, and also by including writers of different sexual orientation. Okay, fine. Now students may be wondering, okay, so this is a little vague. Can you please elaborate on this? Okay, yes, I will certainly elaborate on this. Dear friends, it is in this context, that is, we are talking of expanding the canon. So what are we talking about now? Under the rubrics of deconstructing the canon, under the rubrics of critiquing the canon, we are talking about expanding the canon. It is in this connection that I would like to make three observations, and I am sure not the students, I am sure the staff members, particularly the senior staff members, you must be aware of what happened in the 1970s and 1980s, particularly in the United States of America, with reference to the critiquing of the canon. I'm referring to what is known as the canon war. Now there is a war between Russia and Ukraine, an unjust war. So that is a military war, a physical war, but we are talking about a literary war, a canon war. So it is in this context that I would like to draw your attention to three mega events. So in 1973, a conference was organized in Chicago, United States of America. Now, all of you, particularly the MA students and the PhD students, I am sure you are using the MLA handbook for mechanics and for documentation. So MLA, Modern Language Association, okay, the headquarters is in the United States of America, and every year they organize an annual convention. So for the year 1973, the annual convention, the MLA annual convention was organized in Chicago, and it was in this MLA convention, year is 1973, place is Chicago, that a critic called Paul Lauter, Lauter. Paul Lauter talked about the canonization of non-white, non-male authors. Okay, so he questioned, why is it that we have all male authors in the canon? Why is it that we have all white authors? So he raised an interesting question. Why not women authors? Why not Black authors? Why not African American authors? So it was he who launched the discussion in America regarding the canonization of non-white authors and non-male authors. And please remember, this happened in 1973. In 1987, another interesting event happened. So this time it is not a conference, it is not a seminar, but this time it is the publication of a book. And the author of this book is a white American called Alan Bloom. And he wrote a book that was hotly debated and widely discussed. The title of the book is Closing of the Mind. And the subtitle is How Higher Education Has Failed Democracy and Impoverished the Souls of Today's Students. And please remember, this was in 1987. And the canon war continued. Okay, when you talk about a war, when you talk of a battle, there should be two sides, like Russia and Ukraine. So here, the war was fought between two groups, traditionalists on the one hand and multiculturalists on the other. I repeat, the war, the canon war was fought between traditionalists on the one hand and multiculturalists on the other. Now, what was the argument of the traditionalists? What was the battle cry of the traditionalists? And on the other side, what was the battle cry of the multiculturalists? Now, the traditionalists, I'm sure you must have guessed it, their battle cry was, let us preserve the purity of the canon. We will not include any new names. We will certainly not include women authors. We will not include Black authors. Let us stick to the list that is already available, and let us do nothing to disturb the list of great authors and great poets and great novelists and great short story writers. So the traditionalists, their battle cry was no new authors, no women authors, no Black authors. Let us stick to the list. Let us preserve the purity of the list. So this was the battle cry of the traditionalists. Now, on the other hand, we had the multiculturalists. Look at the word multiculturalist. Their argument was the canon is okay, but we should not leave it as it is. We have to expand the boundaries of the canon by making it multicultural. And how do you make it multicultural? Include a lot of women authors, include authors from other languages, other cultures, other races, other castes. Okay, so they fought against those who wanted to preserve, maintain and preserve the purity of the canon. So this was in 1987. This was the second event. And the third event I have already referred to. 1994, Harold Bloom came up with a very important book titled The Western Canon, the Books and Schools of the Ages. I have already talked about it. He talks about 26 authors, 22 male authors, and 4 female authors. I am not going to repeat it. But what I want to refer to when I discuss Harold Bloom is the whole idea of literature itself is undergoing a momentous change, or to use a metaphor from earthquake, a seismic shift. You're talking about the canon, assuming that the canon is something stable. Okay, so you're talking about whether to preserve these names as they are, or whether to include more names and by making it multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-caste. Okay, so the battle cry of the traditionalists on the one hand and the multiculturalists on the other. In this context, Harold Bloom raises an important question. As you are discussing the concept of the canon, he says you should also be talking about the concept of literature itself. Because if you do not have a concrete, a permanent, a stable idea and definition of the concept of literature, then the concept of canon also comes under fire. Okay, now what is the background as to why Harold Bloom talks about the idea of literature under siege, under attack? Is obviously referring to the Birmingham Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies that was established in 1964 with Richard Hoggett as the founder director, and later Stuart Hall assumed the directorship, and 20 or 25 years later, the center itself was closed. Okay, it's fine. So what is this cultural studies? And I'm sure every department today, every college, every department today, every English department today, particularly at the master's level, has included a paper on cultural studies. And that paper, cultural studies, that deconstructs the idea of literature. So that is why Harold Bloom, he is very much against the invasion of cultural studies, and in fact he is scared that one day English departments will be renamed or rechristened as cultural studies departments. So he is worried that Batman comics will be smuggled into English classrooms. That is how he puts it. I repeat, he is afraid that Batman comics will be smuggled into English classrooms. When I was a student, I studied Shakespeare, I studied Whitman, I studied Samuel Johnson, I studied Jane Austen, I studied George Eliot. But today, in the name of cultural studies, we watch a lot of films, we analyze comics, we analyze advertisements, and we are talking of digital humanities, we are talking of medical humanities. So the whole idea of literature, the canonical definition of literature itself is undergoing momentous and seismic shifts and changes. So it is in this context that we need to talk about what is literature, and when you talk of what is literature, you also need to talk about what is the canon. Okay, so dear friends, that was the third part of my presentation. So in the third part of the presentation, I established 2 points very clearly. Something is not okay with the canon, and therefore we need to rewrite the canon. But we do not have any easy solutions for rewriting the canon. And point number 2, in this context, I talked about the canon wars between those who want to maintain the purity of the canon on the one hand, and the others, the multiculturalists, very especially, who wanted to redraw the boundaries of the canon by including more authors, particularly women authors and authors of other colors, languages, castes, and ethnicities. Fine. Now let us go to the last part of the discussion. Now the last part of the discussion talks about as teachers. Okay, so far I have been talking to both teachers and students. Now I would like to talk exclusively to the teachers. That doesn't mean that I'm sidelining or marginalizing the students. Fine. Now, as teachers, we have a greater responsibility because we are talking about the canon. Particularly, we are talking about the rewriting or the reformulating or the critiquing or the deconstructing of the canon. So as teachers, we have a greater role, we have a greater responsibility. So what is that? I will talk about 5 points, and with that I will close. So the first is, as teachers of English studies, what we should do is, whether we teach English or whether we teach Tamil or whether we teach French or Sanskrit, we should encourage the students to have a personal canon. Okay, so we should ask your first MA student or a second MA student or a PhD student, who is your favorite poet, or what are your favorite films, or what are your favorite novels, or who is your favorite historian. So they should have a personal canon, and as teachers we should help the students in preparing this list. So we should help them curate, we should curate the list for them. So the first point is, as teachers, we should encourage our students, whether they are BA students or MA students or research students, to have a personal canon. If you ask them, who are your favorite poets? Okay, so they should be able to tell us, okay, when it comes to the English canon, these are my favorite poets. When it comes to the Tamil canon, these are my favorite poets. And they should also be able to articulate as to why They say these are my favorite poets in the English canon, and these are my favorite poets in the Telugu canon or the Malayalam canon or the Tamil canon. So that is point number one. Now, point number two, as teachers, as members of the boards of studies, and as members of the academic council and other higher bodies, we have a greater responsibility when we talk about expanding the boundaries of the canon or expanding the perimeters of the canon. Fine. In this context, I would like to give you 3 concrete suggestions. Now, recently I went to a college for board of studies. Okay, it was not a physical meeting as such, it was a virtual meeting. Now, under American literature, I was shocked to say this was the syllabus for the MA English Studies, MA English program. And the paper was in the 3rd semester or 2nd semester, I don't remember, but the paper was American literature. 95%, I am not exaggerating, please believe me, 95% of the authors were all white, whether it was poetry or short story or novels or essays, all by white authors. So I said, you have such a rich tradition from African American literature, whether it is poetry or novels. We have Nobel Prize winning novelists or playwrights. Okay, so why don't you include at least in, even if it is not 50-50, at least it would be 60-40 or 70-30. So which means as teachers, we should be very conscious. Okay, I have seen in many women's college that they do not give enough representation to women authors, even though they are a women's institution. So as teachers, it is our responsibility to make the canon as multicultural as possible. I repeat, to make the canon as multicultural as possible. So there should be women authors, there should be Dalit writers, there should be tribal writers, there should be native writers, there should be indigenous writers, writers of indigenous origin. So we will include a variety of literatures so that the canon becomes multicultural. And this is my second observation. My third observation, now you go to any college or any university, you will certainly find a paper like post-colonial studies, or you find a paper like subaltern studies or Dalit literature, or some universities have even gone ahead and prescribed a paper called refugee literature or partition literature. Okay, fine. I appreciate them, I congratulate them. But then what happens is they prescribe texts, okay, gender studies, they prescribe some text by women authors, or by some Dalit writers, or by some native writers or indigenous writers. But then the point that I want to emphasize is, but the way they teach these texts, they are in no way different from the way they would teach the mainstream texts. I'm sure you get the point. Okay, you have prescribed Bama. That is how I began my presentation. Or you have prescribed to Sugita Rani. I refer to the newspaper clipping. Or you have referred to Limbali. Or you have prescribed a text, let us say, by a Maori writer from New Zealand. But then how do you teach it? Somewhere you have to underline how the Dalit aesthetics and ideology, how the native aesthetics and ideology, how the indigenous ideology and aesthetics is different from the mainstream ideology and aesthetic. If you were to teach this particular text as you would teach a mainstream text, then not only are you doing injustice to the students, but you're also doing injustice to the canon itself and to these marginalized writers. So therefore, when you discuss these authors, when you discuss these literatures, whether it is women's literature or Dalit literature or tribal literature or native literature or indigenous literature, focus on identity politics and discuss questions of difference. Then the fourth point is, you want to introduce a new author, you want to introduce a new paper. So what you do is, as a prelude, not only a prelude, but as a postlude also, if I can coin that word, prelude and postlude. So what you do is, every year you organize seminars, you organize workshops, you organize paper presentations. So you say, oh, this year we will have a seminar on transgender literature, or this year we will have a seminar on literatures in translation, or this year we will have a seminar on tribal literature or indigenous literature. So that will be a good platform to prepare not only your staff members, but also your students to embrace changes when it comes to the curriculum. And the last point that I would like to emphasize is this. These days, all colleges have made it mandatory that MA students should write a dissertation or a project work. In some colleges, even BA students are asked to write some project work of 20 or 30 pages. And very often students are searching for good topics, viable topics. Okay, why not suggest topics on non-canonical authors, non-canonical literatures, non-canonical genres? So you can think of it, because these are concrete ways of promoting canon and promoting particularly the non-canonical writers. So dear friends, so my lecture was in 4 parts. In the first part of the presentation, I raised this question: how do we define the canon? Not only from a biblical point of view, but also from a literary point of view. And in the second part of my presentation, I raised an important question: who, on what basis decides so-and-so is a great writer and decides so-and-so is not a great writer and therefore has not been included in the canon? So what are these criteria? And in the third part of the presentation, I talked about as to how and why we need to deconstruct and critiquing the canon. Then towards the end of the presentation, I talked about the responsibility of teachers, because they are the ones who design curriculum, who draw up the syllabus. They are the ones who ratify the syllabus that has been prepared as members in the boards of studies and academic council and other higher bodies. So it is their job, their responsibility to make it the canon multilingual, multicultural, multicast, multi-ethnic, and other dimensions. So therefore, dear friends, to conclude, I would like to declare that the boundaries of the literary canon are fluid, are porous. They are not rigid, they are not permanent, and they are not stable. So let us rewrite, and let us constantly rewrite the boundaries, redraw the boundaries of the canon. So thank you very much. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am personally happy that the excellence in literary tradition in organizing quality programs is continued by the faculty and dear students of the Department of English of St. Xavier's College. And Reverend Dr. Gilbert Camillus, Secretary of Arulanandar College, respected Professor Vincent Soundaram, the critic, translator, and a great teacher, the former HOD of English of Arulanandar College, Karmathur, Professor Twin Anthony Edward, the head of the Department of English, and Dr. Lizzie Williams, the former head, Dr. Veerlashmi, the present coordinator of Shift 2, Dr. Rajeshwari and Dr. Anthony Rajeshwari, the former coordinators of Shift 2, all the faculty members, and academicians from other institutions, and dear students. I'm very happy to have listened to Dr. Joseph Dureraj, who was with us for a short span of time before he moved to Gandhigram University. His book Interventions, published by FRRC of St. Xavier's College, is a great treasure for research guides and research scholars. The book was published in 2006, and because of the several rare secondary sources he has referred to in the book Interventions, the research scholars find it a treasure because they can take the lead and pursue further research, keeping in mind how literary criticism today has to move from essentialism to multiculturalism, from negation to affirmation, from Gugi Wongo to Tianko's decolonizing the mind to Homi Bhabha's concept of hybridity and third space. This underlines the central thought of Professor Joe Durera's lecture, endowment lecture today. And I find the very argument of Dr. Joseph Dureraj is that the canon or rewriting the canon should not be like the monolith, but it should be like a mosaic where we find different directions, where we find different cultures, different stones of different colors. And there was a logical progression of ideas in Dr. Joseph Dureraj's lecture, which is the usual thing we find. And then starting from the definition of canon, and in the fourth part of his lecture, offering some solutions also. Up to the third part, I also felt that the argument is problematic because it is not so easy to replace or substitute the authors, replacing the canonical writers. That is why Matthew Arnold tried to invent that kind of touchstone method, comparing the great authors with the modern authors and trying to find out the solution. That is only one method. But I was thinking about Gate's concept of world literature. Therefore, Dr. Joseph Dureraj has offered solutions also. I am personally happy how each research scholar or a student should have a personal concept. And then he tried to evolve some criteria also. So he has given us the lead, and we have to pursue further research on this topic. A very excellent thing. This is not any question, but just an observation to the excellence Dr. Joseph Dureraj has showed in this lecture. So congratulations to the resource person, Dr. Joseph Dureraj, and all the organizers, my dear faculty members and the students, for organizing this beautiful lecture. It is a very thought-provoking lecture because during the second part or third part, I also get the problem how to replace these great authors and whether the wish to replace can become the criterion. And the excellence or the quantity or the quality should not be the criterion. But Joseph Dureraj has showed us one way of critiquing the canon. We have to find the other ways also. Great professor, great the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. A great teacher is one who can communicate the complex or the complicated in the most lucid way to the students. This session is yet another testimony to the great teacher you are, sir. To see the larger picture in reading and study, to connect the various parts to get a whole. This presentation has helped us to do that, sir. The journey in search of ideas has been presented on a continuous evaluation of thought with a very clear and thorough compassing of the process of critiquing the canon. I'm sure that these ideas will guide us in our research as well as the framing of the curriculum. Thank you so much, sir. Now it's time for queries. The participants are requested to come forward with your questions. You can either post your questions or raise hands. There's one question, sir. In case of encouraging non-canonical texts, does it have any impact on canonical works?
Okay, this is an interesting question. Now the answer is yes. Okay, when you include a non-canonical author, maybe a woman writer, maybe a Dalit writer, maybe a tribal writer, maybe a writer with native origins or indigenous origins, it will certainly have an impact on the mainstream. How? Now, Professor Albert beautifully put it. Okay, you look at your syllabus, whether it is the BA syllabus or the MA syllabus. You have 5 units, or some colleges have 4 units, or some colleges have 6 units. Now you cannot have more than 10 poets. Even 10 poets, I think the number is a little too much. Okay, you have 6 poets or 7 poets or 8 poets. Now, you want to retain all the canonical authors, you want to retain all the traditional poets, plus you want to bring in some more poets, the so-called non-canonical poets. So which means, okay, instead of 6, can we have 8? Instead of 6, can we have 9? Instead of 6, can we have 10? Instead of 6, can we have 12? The argument would be, okay, here is a wider representation. You have the canonical writers, you also have the non-canonical writers, fine. Now, this would be an ideal situation. This would be an ideal solution. But then the head of the department or the expert members on the board of syllabus would say, I'm sorry, we cannot have 12 poets. There is no space for 12 poets. You can have only 6 poets. You can have only 7 poets. Otherwise, it will be too much of a load on the students and also on the teachers. So which means we have to work within the limited space. Okay, in a paper called the British Literature 1 or American Literature or Indian English Literature, you can have only 4 novels at the most. So these 4 novels, what is going to be your choice? All the 4, are they going to be canonical writers, or all the 4, are they going to be non-canonical writers, or are you going to strike a balance, 2 canonical, 2 non-canonical? I mean, this is difficult, this is complex. Okay, if you bring in all Dalit writers, then they will be complaint. If you bring in all writers from the dominant caste, once again there will be problem. If it is all women writers, there will be problems. If it is all male authors, there will be problem. So you have to balance. But how do you balance? So whatever you do, there will be problems. Okay, so if you remove Hemingway, there will be a hue and cry. If you remove James Joyce, there will be a hue and cry. If you remove Arundhati Roy, there will be a hue and cry. But at some stage where we have to accommodate other brilliant writers, we have to make the choice. And I want to make it very clear, the choice is not going to be simple and easy. It is going to be complex, it is going to be difficult. But at some point in time, we have to make a choice. We have to make a hard choice. Okay, so the point is, if I can put it in a sentence, the space within the curriculum is limited. If it is Indian English literature, at the most we can have only 4 novels. If it is American literature, at the most we can have 6 to 8 poets. So within that space, how do we have enough representations for different cultures, for different ethnic groups, and for both the genders, or for different genders, not only male and female, but for gay, lesbian. So we have to very cleverly accommodate, but I want to make it very clear, this is not an easy job. This is a very difficult job. Whatever decision you make, you're going to invite the anger of the section, but we have to make some choice or the other, and we cannot shirk that responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There's another question, sir. Is it fair to expect non-mainstream writers to be flawless or perfect to find themselves in the canon?
Okay, now this is an interesting question. Now, whenever women are excluded, of course, now they have been brought into the mainstream, at least to some extent. Whenever women are excluded, whenever Dalit writers are included, whenever tribal writers are included, immediately the answer or the argument is, oh, their writings are not up to the mark. And a controversial area is aesthetics. Okay, fine. Now, the point is, who decides that they are not perfect writers? Who decides that their aesthetics is not up to the mark? Who decides that their language is not up to the mark? So what is standard language? What is literary language? What is literary aesthetics? Who defines on what basis? So this is the question that I have been trying to address in the last 1 hour or 1.5 hours. If you have money in the world, if you have time, then what do? You go for a walk, you admire the evening sunset, you write a poem. That is because you have a lot of free time. You come from an affluent family background, economic status. You don't have many worries, so you can enjoy the sunrise or the sunset or nature. Whereas a person like Sojourner Truth would say, "Ain't I a woman? I work in the fields, I work at home. I don't have the time to admire the beauty of the sunrise or the sunset." So therefore, would you consider her a person or an individual with no aesthetics or with very little aesthetics? And you look at the Dalit writers, you look at the partition writers, writers who talk about the partition, or writers who talk about migration. You don't expect them to talk about sunrise, sunset, the beauty of a rose, the beauty of a lotus. They write about hunger, they write about poverty, they write about displacement. And then you say, oh, look at their language, look at their aesthetics, it is not perfect. So whose aesthetics are we talking about? Who decides what is literary, what is non-literary? Who decides this is aesthetics, this is not aesthetics? So these are controversial questions. Even the whole question of, oh, these writers, we will include them when they reach a standard. So this is condescending. Who are you to say that when these writers reach a stage, we will include them in the canon? Who are you to say that? Aren't you condescending? So these are difficult questions, but these are real questions. Because the whole idea of aesthetics is controversial. For a long time, the African American writers were not included because of aesthetics. For a long time, Dalit writers, women writers were not included in the mainstream because they were supposed to lack these aesthetics. But what aesthetics are we talking about, and whose aesthetics are we talking about? These are important questions we have to address. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for clarifying our doubts, sir. I feel a deep sense of gratitude to our erudite resource person, Dr. Joseph A. Durairash. We thank you from the bottom of our heart for your valuable time and academic expertise. His deep insight into the heart of things, lecture that leaves his audience thinking and in quest for further knowledge is incredible. Through the process of lecture, the listeners are led to organize their thoughts. Besides being motivated, he moves into deeper, wider study and inquiry into the field of choice. Thank you, sir. I render a sincere thanks to our respected Reverend Dr. Gilbert Camillus, who besides his busy schedule has come forward to provide us with an excellent opportunity on the depth of things. He has remained our patron and his encouragement matters a lot to us. Thank you, Father, for your valuable presence today. I thank Dr. Joseph Albert, who has been a source of guidance, support, and motivates us in all our endeavors. Thank you, sir. I thank our beloved head of the department, Professor Twin Anthony Edward, our coordinator, Dr. Veera Lakshmi, for providing us with a fruitful day. I thank all the faculties of our department, research scholars, participants from various other colleges, and my dear students for the active participation all through the day. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Department of English, St. Xavier's College, Palinkote, for this warm invitation. Very special thanks to the head of the department, Dr. Twin Anthony Edward, and my respects and my thanks to Dr. V.S. Joseph Albert and to Dr. Lizzie Williams, and of course to my friend, Reverend Dr. Gilbert Camillus. Thank you very much. Thank you, Reverend Father Gilbert.
Thank you, sir.
Wonderful, wonderful sharing, Professor.
Thank you.
Very in-depth study. It was an in-depth analysis about the literary canon. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, sir. Now the students can kindly disperse.